This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
We will start today with the assassination of the American conservative activist Charlie Kirk, and we'll look at Israel's strike on Qatar. Both were real flashpoints this week.
Some family harmony issues for the Liberal Party and the Murdochs were resolved this week, or sort of resolved. We'll get you across those stories.
And Jodie, I've scripted, I don't know if you've seen this in our notes, I've scripted an impersonation for you to deliver in a section on what's coming up for the week ahead. That's something for us all to look forward to.
I'm not making any promises, Claire. Let's get into it.
Starting off with the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, this was a story that broke early on Thursday morning. I felt for Andrew and Alice, they'd just published everything for the Squiz today, and then about half an hour later, the news came through. That, of course, was Australian time. It was midday Wednesday, Utah time. Kirk was shot in the neck while speaking to a crowd at Utah Valley University. That was just outside of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk wasn't necessarily widely known in Australia, but he was a key figure on the conservative side of politics in America. He was a 31-year-old evangelical Christian who founded a conservative advocacy group called Turning Point USA. He's been variously described as a key Trump ally, a right-wing political activist, and the unofficial leader of the MAGA youth movement.
Yeah, it was interesting even talking to some younger members of the team. They had seen quite a bit of his sort of stuff, looking at some Australian politicians and what they had to say, similarly saying younger members of their team were really aware of who this guy was, had a massive following online. His Instagram account alone had more than 8 million followers. Very popular podcast as well. He was an unofficial advisor to Donald Trump back in 2016. He appeared at several rallies with him in the lead up to last year's election as well. He did a lot of work trying to energise conservatives and to really convince them to get out there and to get people to vote.
Yeah, especially the young ones. He was credited with helping Trump get back into power for that reason. His organisation Turning Point was based in Arizona, and Trump won that state by 5 percentage points last year. They'd narrowly lost it back in 2020, and a lot of people said that was down to a lot of Kirk's efforts. He was seen by a lot of people as quite a charismatic sort of character who knew how to work social media. As you said, he was just so deeply engaged in that landscape. But then he also embraced the real life events and debating people.
One of the things he was known for was that debating sort of point and skill that he had, particularly debating university students on campuses. There was a bunch of videos of him online. A lot of them are getting a lot more views this week, particularly challenging Liberal students on issues like abortion, transgender athletes, for example. This was exactly what he was doing when he was killed.
Yeah, it was the first stop on Turning Point USA's American Comeback Tour, they called it. Kirk was speaking in front of about 3,000 people at this outdoor event in Utah. Someone had just asked if he knew how many mass shooters there had been in America in the last decade, and he started to respond to that, saying counting or not counting gang violence, and that turned out to be his last sentence. It was clear pretty quickly after he was shot that it was likely fatal.
Cue scenes of absolute panic. I've seen those videos from some of the security cameras from the university. The crowd dropped to the ground. People were heard yelling out in shock. Some of them started running for the exits in much of as they could in that sort of really public kind of, looked like a courtyard or a kind of commons ground. Kirk's security, he had his own security. Personnel there tried to urgently carry him to a car to be taken to hospital. Police took a couple of people into custody, but neither turned out to be the shooting suspect. As we're recording this on Friday, that person, the shooter, remains at large.
Yeah, it's believed the shot was fired from the roof of a nearby building, a distance of around 100 to 200 metres away. It was clearly fired by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Within about 24 hours, the FBI released a picture of the person of interest. It looked like a young man in a cap and sunglasses. Not a super high quality image, but if you knew that person, you'd be able to identify him from those photos. They revealed that they'd found the gun that they believe was used. It was a high-powered bolt-action rifle found in a wooded area near the uni, and they offered a $100,000 reward for information.
Yeah, you can see in the footage from the scene that Kirk had those security guards around him. They were standing in front of him, but clearly they were powerless to be able to save him. It's understood there were also some plainclothes police in the crowd. Witnesses said that there was no security checks, though, to be able to get to that event.
No, it's quite an open sort of free-for-all. Donald Trump was the one to announce Kirk's death online, and Utah's Governor Spencer Cox was quick to label this a political assassination. He promised to track down the person responsible and bring them to justice, and reminded them quite ominously that Utah still practices the death penalty.
Trump said that Kirk was a very, very good friend of mine and a tremendous person. He blamed the media. He blamed the radical left for what happened as well, even though no one has been arrested, as we said at this point in time. No particular motive has been confirmed by authorities either. So what is behind all of this, we don't know for sure, but certainly that's what the president thought.
Yeah, there was a moment of silence to honour Kirk on the floor of the US House of Representatives within hours, really, of this happening. But as soon as that silence was over, Republicans and Democrats started yelling at each other. One of Kirk's Republican allies pointed at the Democrats and yelled, "You all caused this." And a Democrat then yelled out, "Pass some gun laws."
Yeah, that's really tough. It's really ironic, of course, this has been pointed out in the analysis of all of this, that he was talking about mass shootings at the time that he was shot himself. He's previously said that it's basically worth having some gun deaths each year in order for the Second Amendment to protect Americans' God-given rights to hold arms. No doubt this will put American gun laws back on the agenda, though.
Absolutely. There's also a lot of concern about this being a tinderbox issue, which could ignite more political violence in the US. Attacks have taken place on both sides of politics recently. There was the attempted assassination of Trump, of course, last year. The Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, had his home set alight while he and his family were asleep inside. And 3 months ago, the Democratic state lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband were assassinated in their Minnesota home. And they're just some of the political attacks we've seen.
Yeah, it's only natural, I guess, even from afar, to have this conversation about what is the political environment in the US at the moment and how dangerous it seems to be becoming anyway. Some said that the US could even be on the brink of a civil war. That's sort of the outside sort of edge of this conversation, that the intensity of the polarisation is at that point. The New York Times spoke to a political science professor from the University of Chicago. They said that measuring Americans' tolerance for political violence since the January 6th riots in 2021, saying that, and this is his quote, "We are seeing more radicalised politics and more support for violence than at any point since we've been doing these studies."
Yeah, Michael Koziol, the US correspondent for 9 newspapers, wrote an opinion piece saying that Kirk's assassination will reverberate across the country and around the world in ways that we can't know in the immediate aftermath. He points out that anyone and everyone might be next.
Within hours of Kirk's death, Fox News host Jesse Waters promised to avenge Charlie's death in the way Charlie would want it to be avenged. It's hardly a lowering of the temperature there. Also, the far-right Patriots.win website posted messages like, "Start the Democratic extinction event." So really, really scary times.
Yeah, frightening.
Jodie, we say it every week. There was a lot of news.
A lot of selection for us, at least.
This week, we'll get you across 3 other stories that we've selected. There was probably a list of about 10 that we could have very credibly picked
podcasts.
from. Exactly, but we have narrowed it down. But we'll start with Israel launching airstrikes on Qatar on Tuesday. They were targeting Hamas political leaders. Officials from the terror group have been based in Doha for over a decade. Israel, though, has never hit Qatar directly before.
No, that's why this was so big. And the timing is also something to note. The Hamas officials were in the middle of an internal meeting and they were discussing President Trump's latest ceasefire proposal when the missiles hit. Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu's justification was that these Hamas leaders were responsible for the October 7 attacks and for continued attacks on Israel.
Yeah, some reports also tying it to a shooting in occupied East Jerusalem on Monday where 6 Israelis were killed. So Israel strikes hit the very people who could say yes or no to a ceasefire and the release of the hostages who were taken from Israel on the 7th of October in 2023, almost 2 years ago now.
And specifically, Israel was targeting Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas's chief negotiator, though Hamas claims that he managed to survive this attack. There were some casualties, though. Hamas has said that al-Hayya's son was killed, along with 5 others, including at least one Qatari security official. I guess a bit of context about Qatar's involvement in all of this would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it really would help. So Qatar's been walking this diplomatic tightrope for years. They host the largest US military base in the Middle East. They also provide a neutral space for groups like Hamas. Also, remember the Taliban, through those years, they were negotiating out of Qatar as well. They have sort of maintained these political offices in that nation. It makes them the region's go-to mediator. It's also got a very, very complex relationship with some of its Arab neighbours that's worth understanding.
Yeah, I wasn't quite across all of this. So Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain had Qatar under complete blockade from 2017 to 2021. They cut diplomatic ties, they closed airspace, accused them of supporting terrorism. So their response to Israel's strike has been interesting to see.
Yeah, so the UAE, who has been the biggest champion of isolating Qatar, its president flew in on Wednesday with a delegation to show solidarity. Saudi's Crown Prince also headed there on Thursday. For them, it's all about sovereignty. So the idea that countries shouldn't violate each other's borders with these military strikes.
Yeah, a key principle in international law, and that trumps their other disputes at the moment. Essentially, Israel has created unity where there was division before.
Yeah, that's one of the big talking points in the analysis after this. Since all of this started, one element of the 7 October attacks really, really stuck with me. I remember talking about this at the time and we haven't sort of really picked it up again much since then. One of the reasons Hamas attacked Israel was to scuttle plans for this sort of agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the idea that they could sort of be better neighbours, that they could actually have closer ties. Hamas was very concerned that that would marginalise the Palestinian cause, and now that Saudi normalisation is very, very much off the table. That's a result of part of this. And on the issue of sorting out Israel's war on Hamas in Gaza, Netanyahu has crossed this red line that's made it very, very difficult to restart any ceasefire talks.
Qatar's Prime Minister said that he'd been meeting with Israeli hostage families that very morning. He called it barbaric and said Netanyahu killed any hope for these hostages. Remember, around 20 of the hostages are still believed to be alive in Gaza, and Qatar is now reassessing everything about that mediation role that it's been playing. Without them, there's not really any other alternative.
No, the United States can't host it. The Western sort of other nations who are around this can't really host it. There's lots of these sort of ripple effects on regional alliances, on the hostages, on any hope for peace. Analysts say that those ripples could last for years. That's just something really to clock as another big thing that's happened, another unprecedented thing in the year. From one international thing back to Australia, the federal Liberal Party's had quite a week this week.
It really has. Liberal Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price was dumped from the shadow front bench on Wednesday. But this whole saga reveals something much deeper about what's actually happening inside the Liberal Party.
Yeah, it really does. But let's just get, I guess, across the details of what actually happened in the last sort of 10 days or so. Jacinta Price went on ABC TV's, their 24 news channel on the afternoon briefing. That's the one Patricia Kavelis hosts these days. We have it on in the office every day. She did that last week and she said that the Albanese government was prioritising Indian migrants because essentially they vote Labor, saying really that Labor was somehow gaming the immigration system for some sort of electoral advantage. She did walk back her position, but she stopped short of any sort of apology.
Yeah, that's not what got her sacked, though, is it? That actually happened when she refused to back Lee's leadership this week.
Yeah, exactly. So to make that difference, it wasn't what she said about Indian immigration. It was that she didn't support Susan Lee. So that happened this week in a press conference. Jacinta Nampijinpa Price was asked, are you apologising? And she just said what she said. And then she got this sort of repeated string of questions about, do you support Susan Lee? Do you support Susan Lee? And she just kept saying these are matters for the party room. So it got pretty uncomfortable. I guess the thing, just now to get into a bit of context and background about all of that, it was really just, you and I were laughing, Jodie. I said a few weeks ago, because it feels like the election was 2 seconds ago. The federal election actually is about 3 or 4 months. We'll skip past that. Price defected from the National Party to join the Liberal Party. She was on a leadership ticket with Angus Taylor. Angus wanted to be the leader. The idea was that Price would be the deputy leader to Angus Taylor. Lee, of course, beat Angus Taylor, and Price ultimately didn't get considered to be the deputy. Just pointing out really that she was on the team that was running against Susan Lee.
One of the legends of the press gallery is Michelle Grattan. She wrote this week that the episode is a proxy for the longer-term debilitating battle over the party's leadership and identity.
One key player in all of this, just to call out, is Alex Hawke. You really have to be deep inside baseball to understand all of these sort of little bits and pieces, but Hawke is definitely worth understanding in this sort of whole story. He's Lee's factional protector. They're in the same faction. They're essentially centre-right. They're not sort of on the conservative end, which is where Jacinta Price and Angus Taylor and people like that are. One thing to know is that he was deployed essentially by Susan Lee in this whole chapter to try and strong-arm Jacinta Price into apologising. She accused him of bullying, though, and that's when things really escalated from something that could have been shut down in 24 hours. When she made the comments, she could have walked them back and then we all move on, but it turned into a whole crisis.
Yeah, Lee had to uphold her authority, but some say that she's undermined it at the same time by cutting Price. Don't think she had much choice, though, given she was refusing to back the leader. One thing I wanted to probe was the original claim that Indian migrants tend to vote Labor. What was that about?
Yeah, it's one thing I got stuck on too. It's like, well, what about that original claim? Like, is it a thing? Certainly the government says no, they're not tricking any kind of immigration system to try and bring more Indian migrants into the country so that they vote Labor. They say that's absolutely not happening. There's no official data, though, on how any of us vote, any racial group, any demographic group. We don't have that data. But one company that does a bit of this work in their polling is Redbridge. They do some of the best polling in the country, and its principal is Cos Samaras. He recently said 85% of the Indian diaspora voted for the Labor Party at the last election, thereabouts. It varies across the country, he said.
So interesting figures.
It's an interesting thing to understand,
but also potentially divisive to discuss, isn't it?
Exactly. I hadn't really clocked it, but if you wanted a number on that, that's the number that's out there. I don't think we need to probe that any further. That's their dirty laundry. We'll see where it goes from there. We do need an opposition that works, though. Our democracy really needs that sort of check, given the government has such a huge majority. Let's move on to another family in disharmony. Maybe they've resolved it a bit better than the Liberal Party, and that's the Murdochs.
That family succession battle finally came to an end this week. Lachlan Murdoch now firmly in control of the empire, and his 3 siblings walking away with a cool $1.1 billion each. Patriarch Rupert has delivered what's being called one of the greatest intergenerational wealth transfers in Australian history. The 3 exiled siblings, Prudence, Elizabeth and James, released a statement, a joint statement, saying that they're pleased that the matter is behind them.
Yeah, I'd be pretty pleased with $1.1 billion
Most
US
people would.
dollars. That would make me happy, I think. I know they say money doesn't make you happy. I reckon I could have a go at it. This whole saga really has been quite fascinating. It certainly gripped me. I will read anything about this because I love Succession, the TV show. It's just such an interesting story. The idea, though, about who would succeed Rupert to to run that family's media empire. It's been the subject of jostling for many, many, many years.
And it's moved around a bit too, hasn't
Absolutely.
it? Lachlan wasn't always the top pick.
No, and yeah, if you do believe that the TV show is kind of like what's happened with this family, understanding sort of preferencing one sibling here and one sibling there and, you know, playing them off against each other is, even though they've kept it pretty tight, seems to be what has happened for the Murdochs. Though, in recent times, it's been really clear that Lachlan, the eldest son, was going to be the one to head up News Corp and Fox Corp.
Yeah, they launched something called Project Family Harmony, which was actually an attempt to essentially write the other three siblings out of the family trust. That didn't go down too well. The three excluded siblings took it to court. You probably remember some of those appearances in Reno in Nevada.
That's right.
And all the family's dirty laundry spilled into public view when those court documents leaked, which is the risk of litigation.
Yep, but now they've ended up with a much better deal than they were originally offered when it came to those discussions around Operation Family Harmony. And for media watchers, it means that Fox News, which is that broadcasting juggernaut in the United States, it stays very firmly in the hands of someone who is politically conservative.
Yeah, any chance of James and the others softening the network's pro-Trump stance is now off the table. That was in play because James, Elizabeth and Prudence aren't as fervent about that sort of pro-Trump position. They're not as conservative as Lachlan. For James, he's quite the opposite, in fact, and now Lachlan has got control.
Yeah, so Lachlan has already told investors that the settlement gives them, and this is his quote, clarity about our strategy going forward. The translation, expect more of the same. The succession question that's hung over the family empire for years is finally resolved, and it's exactly the outcome that Rupert wanted.
As for what's next, 94-year-old Rupert is caught up in a legal battle with Donald Trump. The president is suing Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion over an article claiming that Trump wrote a crude birthday message to Jeffrey Epstein. That was back in 2003. Trump says that it's fake, and his lawyers argued that they need to depose Murdoch immediately because at 94, he might actually die before the case goes to trial. It's a bit of a morbid discussion, isn't it?
It is. And how to get around this, Murdoch has essentially agreed to send Trump regular health updates. There will be sworn medical declarations filed with the court. If he fails to provide those reports in the agreed upon manner, he might have to deliver some sort of emergency deposition to fulfil exactly that request. So Murdoch said to have told his associates, "I'm 94 years old. I will not be intimidated."
Don't think Rupert's ever been intimidated in his life. It's not changing now.
Rightio, so let's look at what's coming up in the week ahead, starting with today. The World Athletics Championships, they begin in Tokyo. It's on until next Sunday. Probably the main focus for us is teenage sprint sensation Gout. He's already running times, of course, that people are comparing with Usain Bolt.
He's incredible. He'll make his first appearance at the meet in the 200-metre heats, which are Wednesday night our time. Sticking with today, 1 p.m, we've got the Davis Cup, Australia v Belgium. That's in Sydney. And there's been a bit of drama with the coach and captain Leighton Hewitt. He's been suspended for offensive conduct.
Yeah, so this week, International Tennis Integrity Agency, that agency found him guilty of pushing a doping control official. That happened a few weeks ago. That comes with a 2-week suspension, also a $30,000 fine. Hewitt, of course, isn't playing, but he has this sort of captain-coach role of our Davis Cup team. He's denied the charge. He's going to appeal that. Essentially, what it means is that he wouldn't be allowed to take part in any tennis-related activities, including coaching, mentoring, playing, captaincy, any sort of associated roles. That ban is in place, but it doesn't kick in until after this Davis Cup round.
It's a big deal for him. We should say what this Davis Cup round actually is as well.
Not everyone knows what the Davis Cup is, I guess.
No, you know the name, but you don't necessarily know what it is. The Cup is the leading annual men's international team tennis competition, and it's where nations compete for the title of world champions. This is a second-round qualifier for the finals. Australia is ranked number 2 in the world after Italy, and we're chasing a 4th consecutive appearance at the Davis Cup Final 8, and that will take place in Italy in November.
So there you go.
That's your wrap-up of
We
the
know
Davis
all
Cup.
about Davis Cup. It's test number 2. We're still on Saturday, by the way. Test number 2 of the Wallabies against Argentina. That's in Sydney as well. We beat them last week in Townsville, so thumbs up for a second go. Tonight at 7:35 p.m, we're going to get the AFL semi-final. Queensland footy fans have really been waiting for this one. Brisbane Lions versus the Gold Coast Suns in what they're calling the Q Clash.
Yes, the first time for the Suns in the finals, I think.
Yep.
Also today, Floriade begins in Canberra, Australia's biggest celebration of spring. Did you used to go to Floriade when you lived in Canberra?
We did. When I was at university, I lived on campus at ANU. It was about 2 kilometres around this beautiful lake track to get to Floriade. Before security was a thing, you could sneak in and get a few, like early in the morning, and get a few.
Get a few flowers for your bedside table.
Exactly.
Oh, Claire.
Not too many. Weren't too
Bit of a
destructive.
confession there.
I know.
But how good is shoulder season in Canberra? It's like autumn and spring when Canberra shines.
I could not agree with you more. I reckon one of my favourite places and times in the whole world is Canberra in spring.
Sunday morning is another early one for rugby fans. 1 a.m. The Wallaroos are in the Women's Rugby World Cup quarter-final against Canada in Bristol.
Yep, go girls, we've got this, I reckon. Also on Monday, the 77th Emmy Awards. That's at 10 a.m. our time. It's TV's premier awards. This year, hosting is the comedian Nate Bargatze. You familiar with him at all?
I feel so out of the loop because you guys were talking about him a lot in the production meeting and I did not confess that I have no idea who you're talking about.
Dive onto Netflix. There's a couple of comedy specials. He's hilarious and it's clean. Like, he doesn't swear. They're not particularly nasty or crude kind of stories in his comedy. A lot about his family. He is hilarious. Shows to watch at the Emmys for the awards: Severance, The Studio, Adolescence, Hacks, Andor, The Penguin. I reckon Andrew will give everyone a good wrap-up of that when we get to Tuesday next week. Still on Monday, though, Syria is holding parliamentary elections for the first time since the fall of the Assad regime. Pretty significant moment for that country, although not all provinces are participating. There's still some areas that aren't under control of the regime that is now putting together some elections. So, yeah, still a very big moment for Syria.
Tuesday marks PNG's 50th Independence Day. Papua New Guinea starts celebrations on Sunday, but the main day is actually Tuesday. Also on Tuesday at the National Press Club is Dr. Kurt Campbell. He is chairman and co-founder of the Asia Group, but he served as former President Biden's principal advisor on the Indo-Pacific.
Yep, could be really informative. He's been in a lot of conversations about AUKUS, and there's a big question mark over AUKUS at the moment with the United States review. So our relationships in the region, of course, very much always a talking point these days. So that could be an interesting one. Wednesday, Coalition leader Susan Lee, she's delivering her first major economic speech. That's at a CEDA event. They're the Committee for the Economic Development of Australia.
That'll be closely watched, no doubt. Thursday is a big day for the tech sector. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is meeting with OpenAI's executive leadership, and that's to discuss making Australia a destination for strategic AI investment. They're the mob, of course, behind ChatGPT.
Yep. They're a pretty influential company these days. OpenAI, of course, is looking at opening offices around the world. Sydney could be an option. That could happen as soon as later this year.
Does that mean lots of jobs or not because it's AI?
I don't know. That's a very good question. But yeah, positioning Australia as somehow a player in the AI race is definitely a thing. Also on Thursday, we're going to get the employment figures for August from the ABS. Always key. Friday, former Liberal staffer Bruce Lerman appears in court in Hobart over charges of stealing a car.
We should also note that the Albanese government is expected to announce its 2035 climate target this week. The government's existing 43% emissions reductions target on 2005 levels by 2030 is already proving difficult to achieve. But the 2035 target is expected to be even more ambitious.
Yeah, let's see how that goes. That will generate headlines for sure. We can't end on that note. I'll also point out that Friday is Talk Like a Pirate Day.
You'd have to get several more wines under my belt, Claire, if you're going to get me talking like a pirate.
I have scripted Aha Mahadis.
If you're going to say that, you got to say it in a pirate voice.
Well, I can't. I thought you would. But
Aha,
anyway.
me hearties.
Thank you very much.
I delivered after all.
Squiz recommends, I've got a couple, I'm being greedy today. Given we've been talking about the Murdochs, I thought I'd repoint people to the Atlantic article. We talked about that a bit earlier this year. I even went as far as getting a subscription to the Atlantic.
Did I, off the back of your recommendation.
It's an interview with James Murdoch about exactly everything that was going on. It was sort of the really first break of cover that anyone from the Murdoch family, particularly those siblings who were on the outer, talking about what was going on. So just putting that back on your radar. The other thing I wanted to point people to, because you'll probably see it around a little bit, there is a new documentary on Netflix that, you know, one of these celebrity ones that's no doubt been executive produced by the talent who it's about. So it's sort of that varnished view.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this one is called AKA Charlie Sheen. If you're of my age and lived through that 80s and 90s era, you'll find it interesting from that perspective because it's in two parts. The first part really is like that nostalgia blast of, you know, Martin Sheen, his brother Emilio Estevez, all of those movies that they were involved in, super interesting. I kind of agree with the reviews that Charlie Sheen actually seems like a really difficult character, and this is his very glowing sort of review of himself.
Like his own PR job about himself.
Yeah. I mean, he talks about all the drugs and not being a particularly good father, but he still seems to come out of this smelling like roses.
I've got a very practical recommendation for you this week.
Yep.
And it is for those who suffer from dry hands.
Yes. My dry hand is up.
Yes. Mine never used to be dry, and now I'm paying attention to this sort of advice. Dr. Danny, who listens to Squiz, and I trust her on all things scientific and most things in general. She's a very highly respected specialist. She told me that QV Derm Care sting-free ointment with ceramides is the best cream for dry hands. Also apparently good for nappy rash for those with babies. So we'll put a link up there for you. It's a nice basic one, you know, none of this fancy expensive stuff that doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
I've tried this one and it's excellent for
fantastic.
Dry hands.
We'll have the link for that and the other couple of my greedy too in the episode notes as well. Squiz Press this week, just wanted to point you to a couple of series that have wrapped up for us. Our menopause series has ended. If you jump over to the Squiz Today show, you'll be able to see those 3 episodes. They're pretty clearly marked for your podcast player. The factual information is so helpful, and the people who have reached out to us to say thank you for doing it in a non-sensational way, which is quality information, has been really, really encouraging. It's what we wanted it to be, so we're really happy that that's landed with Squizzes as well. And well done to Gillian Bradford again. She did a wonderful job. Our series as well here on the News Club channel, The Big Threat, has wrapped up. It's a lot. Like, it's a big series, that one, and really huge themes. I think we'll resurface some of that, particularly as we head into the part of the year where things are just a bit easier to consume over breaks when you've got a little bit more time.
Maybe like a road trip or something.
It's
you could
that
listen
kind
to a
of
few
series. Yeah, we're really proud of it. It's beautifully produced. It's got some really, really great interviews, and Bryce has done such a wonderful job of unpacking all of these issues around democracy and making sure that we're informed. And, of course, we have that very, very deep interest in making sure kids get media literacy training and education so that they can become informed citizens too. So
and being able to travel the world and speak to the leaders on this stuff is such an opportunity.
Yeah, so both of those have wrapped up. We'll remind you to go and find those sort of through the rest of the year, but if you want to dive in, go and do that. Jodie, I think we're done. Thank you so much.
Another big week. Thanks.
Catch you next week.
See you then.